I don't know. Kind of, I'm staying out of things that I don't need to do. That I don't need to know. I'm simplifying my life.
I'm with you, but I need to know. Then I don't need.
Yeah, it's more like if I ask, I might have to do something about it. So it's better not to. Sometimes it's better not to know. Hello. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to start with, first of all, recording. Okay. So we're going to start with Ganden Hagyaman, the 100 deities of the land of joyous, a guru yoga practice of Lama Tsongkhapa. So I put it on the screen. All right, let's rock and roll. You sky before me and the lion's throne, lotus in the morning, my guru smiles with delight. Supreme used to spread with teachings. Your holy mind has the intelligence and speech with its excellent explanation is the ear. Holy body is ready and beautiful. You are meaningful to see here and never occurs. Incense light, scented waters, and soft perfections of cloud offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever the individual's body, speech, and mind is special from the endless time. I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. Practicing this gender may of freedoms and riches is meaningful. My body the able to concern Savior. Upon the receptacle of those to this abuse exactly as they are. Virtual collective benefit the teachings and from and in particular may cause the essence of teaching to shine forever.
By the merits of having offered this mandala to others from Papa and his two sons, may I and my family members and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice and actualize the teachings of the Taoist One Lord Son Dharma, who had the morality of an eminently pure way of life, was courageously used to contact sons of the victorious ones and accomplished the yoga of the two stages of bliss and emptiness. Course of having perfectly requested in this way all the beings on my life and the hearts of the perfect pure Father and Sons in the mind into the mind enter my ground. White matter the flow of the flows from the opening of the tube of the white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. You may say, wait, Sanji Chana Soki Chana Chanchu Kali Kali Kasi Kali Shishi Sanji Sanji Chukashu Sanji Chana Soki Chana Chanchu Kali Kali Kasi Kali Shishi Sanji Chukashu Sanji Chana Soki Chana Chanchu Kali Kali Kasi Kali Shishi Sanji Chukashu Kangi Tsultrim zonde Dawa Tamji Pambi Shere Tambi Chunu Benze Kwadung Kela Changse Lo Good morning everyone. Tempo of Sanji Chidang Kotangi down Mamuch to Mamuch Sigors, the Dinan Tatsu, the Mongosova, and Sanji Mutilea, and so those and Ruju Cheche, the Jisu Jucheni, and Kaseta Kanji and Kesam Chichongi, Kawasambras.
So today is a special day. We marking this day the Buddhahood of the Buddha, the enlightenment of the Buddha. Not only that, it's also the day in which the Buddha was born, and also the day in which other important events in the life story of the Buddha have occurred. So we follow the Buddha. We follow the Buddha, and as such, we mark this day with a specially virtuous mind. So there are three major events that we mark this day. So it's the birth of the Buddha, the enlightenment of the Buddha, and finally passing into final nirvana, or passing away. So the Buddha showed us those deeds. And for us, there is something to learn. If we seek to emulate, to follow the footsteps of the Buddha, then we can also think of the things that the Buddha showed, the Buddha displayed, and learn from them. So of those activities, we'd mentioned the death of the Buddha and also his passing away into final nirvana. And it is the nature of the world to function in this way. At the end of every birth, there is death. This is something that is commonly known, commonly accepted in this world. And we are also to follow the act of passing into nirvana. So this is also something that we want to do. So we have taken birth. We met with our parents, with relatives and so forth. We come together with those who are close to our heart. And as such, at the end, there will be separation. Whatever is met is also bound to be separated at the end. Things will end in separation. But we do not understand that. We do not know that, or we do not understand that correctly. And when the time to separate comes, we feel a lot of anguish. We experience great mental suffering because of not understanding that the nature of every meeting, every coming together is to end in dispersal, in separation. So because it is not clear to us, although this is clearly the way that things function, because we do have that sense of unclarity, we end up suffering. And if we know that, if we understand that, we would come to see that as a natural thing. So birth for us would be a natural thing, as well as death, separation would be a natural thing. And therefore, when we will meet up with this moment of separation, there would not be that additional mental anguish, mental suffering that we would experience in recognizing that this is actually a natural state.
아니 주님 응급의 주 금방만 붙이 소요리 딩 아니 소요리 송버점마시 아니 지 고소 특성 돈 남주야 남대 체자와디 남주기 아니 신고가 됐어. 아니 tembi 미무 진전체 조이 tembi 미무 진전체 조이 tembi 각각나와디 남주 셈이야. 아니 need 거야디 진전 촉도 차와있어.
There's no way of avoiding separation, let alone not being able to prevent being separated from our body once death comes. We cannot avoid that. Right? It's not that we can hold on to our body and not be separated from it. So if this is not possible for us to prevent, needless to say that we won't be able to prevent separation from other things as well, from friends, relatives, and so forth. This is what the Buddha taught us. So the Buddha taught us reality, the way the things exist, and those teachings pertain to different levels of existence. All of that was taught to us, shown to us by the Buddha, in showing us the activities of body, speech, and mind. So this is what we need to know. This is what we seek to understand. So mainly when we think of special, we mark the birth, the enlightenment, the passing away of the Buddha. The main thing that we want to do is to remember the Buddha, but also what the Buddha showed.
아니 니모 상기 니모 요바디 방문인 상기 되어 많이 봤지. 아니 찍된 거였어요.
And as we also mark this day, the complete and full enlightenment of the Buddha, what understanding do we get from thinking of the complete and perfect Buddhahood of the Buddha? If we think about it well, if we have a good process of thinking about it, what we can draw from that is that it's not that the Buddha was enlightened right from the very get-go, primordially.
이전 아니 방법 아니 끝당 말이었어. 이 몸을 좀 상기와 했어. 이 빠르야. 아니 게임 가르치는 가르는 때문에 아니 상기도 세기. 이 사무디 인증이 걸고 왔어. 이 지원이 아니 때문에 꽃이 강복이 아니 제반 남자기 이 빠르야. 가르망마티 상기에 탁 가를 때마다 상황이 뒤바라야 고노숨주 노숨주 소단지 나눠야 마토베기 일이야 그 당번이 깨는 때문에 상기내봐 아니지 기부진 때문에 상기내 상황도 남들 디나미 된 거였어.
So when we look at the life story of the Buddha, we can see that first of all, the Buddha took birth. The Buddha was born. And then at some point, through certain conditions, he became enlightened. Right, so he became enlightened sometimes during his 30s. Then there are some conditions that contributed to the Buddha's enlightenment. And we can see that based on the life story of the Buddha. He became enlightened in his 30s after working hard and experiencing hardships and difficulties, which means that it's not that right from the very get-go, right from the beginning, the Buddha was enlightened. Not only that, it's not that just through kicking back and relaxing and kind of taking it easy the Buddha became enlightened. This is something that is quite evident when you look at the life story of the Buddha, and that also serves as an indication to us.
제 아니 조디 아니 좀된디 총사기 같이 상기 아니 게고 된지야 아 총여로스 그냥 아니 예시 노스조와 아니 뇌당 체 이거야 아니 까와치 뭐저 상기샤기 남들이 쓰위여로스 이 지디기 딱 갈등 거였어 먼저 치 디기 짱이야 차지 내려야 차는 좀 그게 봐요. 아니 그냥 뭐만 상기해야 아니 카타 리는 저기야 봐디 다세우슈 차자스 간지 아니 상기 변인지 봐요. 아니 누나 익슨 토니 까지 두신 저기야 봐. 라 이게 세그다 내내로 소바지 가서 같이 공치 잠지는 땡지 아니 소디 아니 로종 토니 아니 저는 상기를 내기가 봐. 이면은 아니 상기가 카다 링도요. 또 템비 남자 코로나. 요 템비 송 그게 가서 같이 좀이게 쇼핑을 써보려. 미세비스 마시바이나 남자 tun동이 나와야. 또 되지. 내스 비어레스.
The Buddha was born into a royal family, and at some point in time he relinquished his status as a prince. He relinquished his princehood and sought the state of enlightenment. That also indicates to us that if we remain in this life, totally consumed with the pleasures of this lifetime only, we will still be separated or cast aside, far away, the state of Buddhahood. The Buddha, as a prince, relinquished all of the pleasures as in the life of the prince in the king's court and sought the state of enlightenment. So if we remain still attached to all those pleasures of sattvic existence, or all the pleasures of this life, we'll still be separated from the state of Buddhahood. So with our body, with our speech, with our mind, we need to persevere, to make effort in pursuing the state of enlightenment. And in so doing, we need to make sure that we have enough to get by, but just that we have enough food, enough clothing, and being satisfied with those bare necessities. Most of our effort towards a state of complete and perfect enlightenment through undergoing the required trainings. Otherwise, if we do not adopt that attitude, we will still maintain that gap between ourselves and the state of Buddhahood. So we can see that, we can understand that based on accounts of the Buddha. And if you just look briefly or shortly, not even extensively, just if you look at the accounts of the life story of the Buddha, you can see how that is also applies to us. Now, in general, in this life, we might still experience some states of wealth. We might have good access to resources, experience plentiful resources. And that is not to say that this is bad. It is a result of merit that we have created in past lifetimes. And yet, if we remain attached to that and becoming completely consumed and engrossed in the wealth of resources that we have in this life, we will miss out. In that sense, we will stand to lose, or we will get that fault of not making a great progress towards the state of enlightenment.
데다 수수의 얘기 농주 미직 지기로 수수의 얘기 직변적인 농주로 속 여기 인생 지체는 아니 지 시행연 통종치야 아니 나기기야 아니 전생기야로 속아 여기 차와이나 아니 농주기 여반데 매번 가게라서 가서 농주 대야기 대화지 이제 동아리 딘지 제바이나 아니 간지 소소 비디오 같이 나소 멘탈이 내가 그래야 유지 차도를 막 비기 짜니니 아니 그래야 펜터가 차고 말았어. 다이 소소는 여러 비기 디긴 지체네 아니 소소기 가서 같이 아니 냠내체 공개 시행이야 장동체 공개 생각 로봇체 공개는 계도는 원리 용주 차고라서 이제
So you might be just one individual and you might experience different degrees of wealth, enjoyments, resources, and so forth. If on that account you end up looking down on others, developing a sense of pride, being competitive with others, it's actually better not to have those resources than to have them. And we say that because we recognize that at the very basis, we want to be happy, we do not want to suffer. And if on account of our wealth, we end up in being competitive, being proud, belittling others and so forth, we are creating our own sense of demise, our own destruction in bringing forth endless and deep states of miserable rebirth in future lifetimes. So as such, it's better not to have those conditions than to have them. So rather than developing those conditions in a negative way like that, we want to use them as conditions for a practice. Conditions for practice that is involved with caring for others, nurturing others, caring for others, protecting others, benefiting others.
그러다 강간주 농주세 이게 집다 아니 굉장히 강요가 아니 농주세 인다여서 농주 깝깝이야 정량 담마시거나 아니 장비 농주 많이 봐 장 농제버지 인지 굉장히 소소 농쟁이 소리 차바이나 소소 농주 차바이나 소소 비리게 가서 같이 라니를 농주 비리 요거 소리 차바이나 아니 고실로 가서
The word for enjoyment or resources in Tibetan is longju, which has that connotation of something that is of use. So there is a user and that which is used. There is an enjoyer and that which is enjoyed. So then when we look at our enjoyments, our resources, what we use, and the way that we do that, then sometimes you might wonder, who is the user and what is being used? With a certain attitude, rather than you being the user, you end up the thing that is being used by your own resources. In that sense, we sometimes become slaves or servants to our own resources. So we can think about it, giving examples. Like, for example, let's look at our houses. So we need a house, right? We need a place to stay, we need a house. But sometimes it happens that you live in a very good house, very good property, to the point in which you become a servant to your own house. In that you need to spend some time cleaning it, maintaining it, fixing it, extending it, taking care of it in one way or another. So when you look at how much time you allocate to doing that, find that actually, rather than that being an object of use for you, you're basically used by that house. You're like the servant of that house.
어떤지 저지래 나 간지 수수를 얘기 농주랑 지치 농 제세 지치 수수를야 아 가시는 얘기 이 저희의 수수 같이 그때 그다 체리 엔 주주 강요가 지 이 양념체 통 요종체 통 아니 땅들이 이 자비종 많이 kim바이는 등지 등지도 중앙 때문에 통이 야포도 상상을 아 먼저도 지수랑 끼고 있어서
So then when we look at our utilities, resources, enjoyments, if we use them in the way that allows us to still have time to allocate for our study, for our practice, and so forth, in that sense, we recognize that we have those utilities and we use them to a certain degree that ensures that we have time for development, for study and practice. I mean, it's not only for monastics to think about it and behave like that. Also, as lay practitioners, as householders, you can do that. And when we see people that maintain this lifestyle, Geshe says that this is something that that you can come to appreciate. We can rejoice in someone that take care of their affairs, of the business in such a way that they allow a good span of time to be spent on study and practice.
나 가시기 테스트가 있는 비견제의 체질 지금은 이용을 아니 땅들이 아니 때라니까 닌자 상승도 좀 더. 그래서 초라가 상승도 좀 되려야 이게 싸우는 쇼는 봤어. 그들이랑
Sometimes it happens that if you already have one thing, you have the wish to have twice as much. You have twice as much, you want three as much. So when you see someone being involved with that state of mind, having that state of mind, then the only thing that you can say is that, alas, they're in a pitiful situation of compassion. Ninja in Tibetan. It is a waste. So for us as followers of the Buddha, we follow the advice of the Buddha. And the advice of the Buddha has to do with developing the wisdom, the intelligence that clearly distinguish between the right and the wrong. So when we think of what did the Buddha say? Well, the Buddha said just that. Develop your wisdom that can well distinguish between the right and the wrong.
아무는 상기 내봐 아니 지금이야 좀 지금 포함한 방식이 있다니 여기까지 들릴 때 상기 내봐 이 가르치는 거에서 나랑 소리 말이야 되게 대신 그거야 아니까지 들릴 만치 장부 장견ችን 저거이나 점들이 나시는 저거이나 난주 점들이 얘기 상기 공부하기 야지 야타는 이투어스
So then in thinking of the story of the Buddha, as we said, one thing that we can draw from is that the Buddha was not Buddha right from the very get-go. Not only that he was born just like us as an ordinary sentient being, and through working hard and experiencing some difficulties, hardships along the way, he was finally able to attain the state of Buddha. So it is also possible for us to do it. Buddha, the Bhagavan, have worked hard in pursuing the state of enlightenment, it is 100% sure, guaranteed that we have the capacity to do that as well.
일단 언주선은 일단 깔끔하고 쉬워지게 상상되지. 이거는 저기 여사만 상상되고 소식을 내야. 이 용기였어. 깔끔하고 지금 내가 이만 인지기 아니 미상으로 아니 미상만이 봐. 이도지 주기 아니 수레지기 아니 때문에 재능기 퇴바 이해가 상관이나 아 대규기 이야기 아니 비율차야기 이 통신을 차야기 까득하고 지어버릴 때는 총알이자 뒤로왔어. 뒤로왔어.
And yet, when you look at the life story of the Buddha, you might end up thinking that this is too hard. This is so difficult, and it would be impossible for me to attain that state. It is possible that you might think like that, but it's not just that we as human beings can appreciate what the Buddha did. Also, any being within the six realms of existence, if they study, reflect, and meditate on what the Buddha did, the different activities of the Buddha, they would develop faith and a deep sense of appreciation in seeing that what the Buddha achieved was a result of a great degree of hardship, in working hard, persevering with that, and at the end attaining the result of Buddhahood.
그러니까 가시기 여기 양면이 깔끔하고 쉬워지던 거냐고 내가 가리었어. 소리들이 오죠. 저니까 아니 이 상기고 주나 아니 이 랑다랑 톤 저거로 맞아. 내가 지금 톤이 아니 지금 나도 이 지금 주소나시 지금 거고 땅이 아니 저 사지 저니가 말았어. 장된 톤 우유 톤 저거이자 장된다 우유 생기 나도 지금 집 나눠고 아니 저 충분히 제가 있는데 이 거는 장부지에 깔끔하게 되었어. 이게 딱지 금지기 공간 처음부터 터야야. 아니 장된 나무에 돼야지 깔끔하게 되어야 되는데 좀 적어 버렸어. 좀 더 뒤통수 터야였어.
You might be thinking that still it is so difficult, so hard to do it. Is there an easy way around it? Can I not do the hard bit, and find something that is quite simple, quite easy, that will get me to the state of Buddhahood? There's nothing such as that. If we want to attain the state of Buddha, we will have to work as hard as the Buddha did. And if we think that there is another way around it, it's just like dealing with any other worldly affairs. So sometimes when we try to accomplish our own worldly affairs, we cut corners. We get involved with some deception, some way of deceiving others in order to get what we want easily. But enlightenment requires honesty and truthfulness. And if we do not pursue this Buddhahood with a sense of honesty, with a sense of truthfulness, it will not be achieved. The Buddha, the Bhagavan, have shown that himself, that the only way to attain that state would be to follow an honest and a truthful path.
너무도 굉장히 하우지 용야지 가서 작업하러 말을 왔어. 그래서 공부 깨우다 한번 소리 아니 같이 까와도 말하는 깨워도 김치 수수이 용야 있어. 간다지 이거 땅 고쳐놓냐. 같이 싸우는 게 굉장히 지금 너 장치 그 공방기 아니 마당한다고 아니 남주다 근데 가면은 지금 내려고 싶던 거기 좀 말았어.
And sometimes we find those teaching situations where a teacher will always be giving an easy and simple presentation, and the audience would also always be interested in something that is easy, something that is simple, in thinking that you can accomplish a great deal if you just focus on something that is just simple. It is a mistake to think that, to look for that simplicity. It is a mistake to look for that simplicity just when you look at what the Buddha had to do in order to attain his own state of enlightenment. So rather than shying away from things that are more complicated or harder, we should be open also to get involved with them. It is not an easy feat at all to attain the state of Buddhahood. So the type of attitude that we should have is, rather than looking for an easy way around it, is to be committed to do it from one end to the next, or at least from one birth to the next, over a succession of rebirths. We want to still continue with the trainings of body, speech, and mind. And particularly when we consider a point of beginning, Geshe said that, like, for example, someone like him who he doesn't consider himself to be so smart or so intelligent. So that being the case, it says that you need to be committed, do your best, to put effort into it and to persevere with training your body, speech, and mind over many lifetimes. So we ask ourselves, what were the deeds that the Buddha performed? Having attained the state of enlightenment, we can see what the Buddha did, what his activities were. But even before attaining the state of enlightenment, at the time of being a trainee along the path, there are quite a lot of accounts to tell what he did before becoming a complete and perfect Buddha. So we read through those accounts, and again, faith arises in our mind. So the Buddha was born in India. He was an Indian, a person of Indian origin. And when you look at what he did and what he taught, you come to see that he was so honest and truthful in his development. And when he attained the state of Buddhahood and gave teachings that pertain to the two aspects of the Buddha's teaching, the aspect of the view of dependent origination, and the aspect of the conduct of non-harmfulness. And as such, when you look at these two aspects, the view of dependent origination and the practice of non-harmfulness, you can come to appreciate how honest and truthful the Buddha was. So then in those teachings of the Buddha, we have those teachings and practices for the development of compassion and bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. And if for the time being you cannot really get your head around the development of compassion or the mind of enlightenment, still you can begin with recognizing that all sentient beings seek happiness, and no sentient being wants to suffer. Even the smallest insect has that wish to be well and to be protected from suffering. So then, when you think of that and you look at the way that you behave, you can come to see that it would not be suitable or appropriate, even in the slightest, to harm others, to cause others degrees of suffering just for the sake of getting your own happiness, what you want. If we were to generate our mind in a way that the Buddha, the Bhagavan did, then Geshe is that such a huge of the things that we to live. We won't have to do that. Like 90% or more, 99% of things that we do to each other as human beings will no longer be there. Like think about not having to quarrel with each other anymore, not having to spend so much effort and resources on defense and war and so forth. Think about, for example, how much of our annual budget is spent on defense, just as states, within countries, within this state. What is the portion of the budget that is spent on defense? In assuming that there are people out there to get you, that you need to defend yourself from these people, that you need to take up arms or to appear to be strong in order to prevent others from attacking you. So then if we develop our minds as human beings, if we generate the mind in the way that the Buddha, the Bhagavan did, would be no need for all of this. The reason for having that is a lack or deficiency in honesty and truthfulness. That's the reason, isn't it? Refuge is Buddha Shakyamuni, and it is 100% guaranteed. You can be 100% sure that we are not mistaken in seeing him as an object of refuge. So we seek refuge in the Buddha. And when we think of what the Buddha stands for and how the Buddha has achieved that state, we can also understand how the Buddha is an object of refuge. In following the path that the Buddha laid out for attaining the state of Buddhahood, we take vows. We have vows in which we restrain ourselves from harming the basis for harming others and the basis for harming them, right? So this is what a vow is involved: abstaining or refraining from harming others and the basis of that harm. So since this is an integral part for pursuing the path that leads to the state of Buddhahood, we take different vows, and particularly today afternoon, according to Eastern time, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is a real Buddha, an actual Buddha Bhagavan, will confer the Bodhisattva vow. And for that reason, Geshe also thought of maybe saying a few words about bodhicitta, the way to engender, to develop bodhicitta. Although Geshe said that his knowledge is not great with respect to what bodhicitta is and how to develop bodhicitta, it's still good to say a few words about the topic.
일단 저기 지지가 나온 거예요. 군주성과 다 같이 디베트한 소소샤 세 시티. 긴자 더 장주 선비에 어디 여러 문제들이 논쟁이야. 아니 좀 있는 거 저거 상기를 이렇게 인증. 아니 좀 되는 게 같이 아니 투기다. 누구다고 아니 최기 먼저 짜는 게 있어. 남자 다들 항상 지친. 요 아니 주지진이 지진에 하는 그 쇼에서 우리는 다들 제거하기 기침으로 왔어.
And in conferring the Bodhisattva vow, His Holiness will go through a certain ritual. There will be some recitation that His Holiness will lead. So he will say, for example, we will repeat after His Holiness, saying that I go for refuge to the three jewels, I lay down all my negativities individually, and so forth. So in doing those recitations, we're going to think that someone that is just like the Buddha, the Bhagavan, is transmitting this essence of teachings of the Buddha, the Bhagavan, to us. He's teaching us how to do. So in order then to follow through those stages, we want to prepare our mind as much as we can. So we still have a couple of hours before that will happen. So we want to start this ritual when our mind is prepared.
아니 그 전주선부터 너무 좋았습니다. 아니 무슨 저기 소소기 그 단대비 식쇼를 지금 나오려야 아니 아니 이제 이제 kalkale 직접 있는 거라도 아니 뒤치 있는 거야. 그치? 그 도비 티콘
So the verse that Geshe was referring to say, I go for refuge to the three jewels. I confess all my negativities individually. I rejoice of all my great. I'm praised the Buddha's enlightenment. So we then get involved with any practice of the Buddha Dharma. It is done on the basis of being combined with refuge. And we begin with refuge, and then we follow through with the development of bodhicitta. And this ritual that His Holiness will lead will begin with developing aspiring bodhicitta. There is a right for embracing aspiring bodhicitta. So sometimes we follow through a procedure in which we take aspiring bodhicitta and then engaging bodhicitta together in the same recitation. And sometimes we do it serially.
땡 투버디 수수 상황을야. 야지나 아니 멤버가 캡수스. 그 데니 수 장주 생다. 어머니 온송도 이신에서 비비 아니 최콘조 또 비비 니 길라요. 이 투가 상성기 이체 여봐요. 아니 최콘조야. 오늘 캡수도 거였어. 아니 파비겐데 아니 그저는 아니 최주도 가져 수수 가리 마시라는 남대신 내내 공부니까 아니 랑된 랑들이 난 프로그램 삼성 이제 여봐요. 아니 그냥 공부했습니다. 남다 했어요. 이거 했어.
So we begin this recitation by going for refuge to the three jewels. So as we go for refuge, first off, we go for refuge to the teacher, the Buddha. And we see the Buddha as one who teaches us, shows us the way for the development of intelligence that can well distinguish between the right and the wrong, the good and the bad, the correct, the incorrect. So we go for refuge to the Buddha and also thinking that I myself can also develop that clear idea, that understanding that can well discern between the right and the wrong. And we also take refuge in the Dhamma. And the actual Dhamma jewel that we take refuge in is true paths and true cessations. So with respect to two true paths, we take refuge in states such as bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, and exalted wisdom that realizes selflessness, that realizes emptiness. That is the actual Dhamma jewel. And not only that, we think about it when we go for refuge to the Dhamma, that I can develop bodhicitta. I can develop wisdom that realizes selflessness in my own mind stream. And through that, we go for refuge. And we also go for refuge to the Sangha, the companionship that we keep along the way in pursuing those paths. The Sangha, those that show us the way, those that teach us the way that we need to follow in order to develop this Dhamma jewel. So if you think about refuge in this way, you develop a perfect refuge.
일단 리젤야다 디바탐지 소소샤스 디바탐지 소소샤스라니까 쪼디 난지 디바치사 고다마스나 아니 류나 이스로스 류나 이스 디바치사기 아니 류나 이스 토니 아니 아니 샤기니 삼성이 반제 지겨봐나 아니 ordinary degrees or degrees.
So that stands for the first line in the recitation that is honest will live and go for refuge to the three jewels. Now, the second line says, I confess all my negativities individually, or I lay them down individually. What it means is that we create negative actions with our body, speech, and mind. And that being the case, we also lay them down with our body, speech, and mind.
In the Royal Gala G runs long and Gala Giswian, Rangi, Dipon, Debuchi, Bebache, and Shin, Chinilia, and Giswian Chelena, and any Castle, Chanju, Sam, Kiagi, Yatin, Sonu, Salty, and deep tonic, Zotorians, Jangan Mutunga Chibi. And never chung luncheon for the what game exists with choice in this song.
That recitation says, I rejoice in the virtues of all my greaters. So looking at the activities that we follow, we lay down our negativities, and on top of that, we rejoice in the virtues of others, which those two elements are methods for completing merit. They are supportive of completing the accumulation of merit. Kappa said in his writing that rejoicing in the virtues of others, in the virtues of my greaters, is a great method for completing or amassing a great amount of accumulation with such a small effort.
인다 상기 찬주이 기송 세카리다 아니 member 찬주 쪽이 생겨봤다 이미 얘기하고 아니 생긴 아니 개발을 넣어 아니 너무 소마다 아니 되는 거였어.
And the last line says, I am sustained by the Buddha's enlightenment. Or you can also say that I take to mind, I take to heart the Buddha's enlightenment. Which is the line that directly speaks of taking up the aspiring mind of enlightenment, which then will be followed up by taking up the trainings of the mind of enlightenment and taking the vow.
That Chanju Senkin, remember Chanju Senkin, and that Geshe Chanju Sen, Travel Lava. The deep reward of the Geshe Chanju Sen, Travel Malava, and remember Chanju Senkin, Chogores, Rongores, General no that Chanju Sen Magiva, Geshe Travel. Wrong models.
Without training in the practices of bodhisattvas, you can still take up the mind of enlightenment. This is permissible. This is something that Rinpoche has said himself. So it is suitable to, or there is a scenario in which you do not train in the deeds of bodhisattvas, and yet you take up the aspiring mind of enlightenment. But then the other way around, in that to train in the deeds of bodhisattvas without taking up the mind of enlightenment, that is not possible.
Yeah, I mean, remember Chanju the Sen might give up, and guessing trouble and love that Chanju Sen don't but them.
So then if you train in the deeds of bodhisattvas without taking up the aspiring mind of enlightenment, and then you also then on that basis take up the vow of the engaging mind of enlightenment, that's not possible, right? So what is not possible here is to train in the deeds of bodhisattvas and take the engaging vow without the aspiring mind of enlightenment. That is not possible.
Is the beginning of the Chanju Sen, the one shared again, and Chanju Sen Gavati, using the voice, Chanju Sen to came out to one, Chanju Sen being human to one, and Chanju Sen somebody told mothers.
That being the case, what we need to do today in order to prepare ourselves for the ceremony afternoon with his honors, we need to generate bodhicitta. We need to recognize, to identify what it is, but also to generate it in the mind stream, because without that, we're not going to be able to obtain the vow.
Yeah, that Chanju Sen saying the Tahas not to Sanji Kumbatot, Sanji Slam, someone actually points to go to the Nadanazi for somebody, Chanju Sen, Domas, Chanju Sen, Kolombi, Kolombi, Ninji said, Sanjan Tangelia, Soldier, your Dojolia, and Chiki, and that community, and 7 years said, and you just said that. You don't listen to Tangelia, and the money would drip to me. You had the negative sound on you, and seriously, Sanji Nachi, Samuel, won't you achieve that? When you did commerce, some of short name, not deep, and that never Chanju Sen said. The discharge is right.
And that being the case, when we think of bodhicitta, then it's not enough to think that I will become Buddha. It's not going to work out if we think that I am going to become Buddha so that everyone will appreciate me. I'll become famous, I'll be someone that everyone likes, everyone appreciates. This is not the way to generate bodhicitta. To generate bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, we need to generate compassion that sees all sentient beings equally with a sense of loving concern, with a sense of compassion. This is the way to give rise to bodhicitta. First of all, we develop that evenness with respect to all living beings, beholding all of them with a sense of compassionate love, wishing to provide them with benefit and joy. But then when we think of our current ability to do so, we recognize that in our current circumstance, we cannot really provide everyone with benefit and joy, but should we attain the state of Buddha, we will be able to do that. And for that reason, we think, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. This is the way to generate good achievement.
아니 상기 전주 이기 송스다운디 이기 송야들이야 넘버 2 차가로스 상기 공방토가 지는 양반이 아니 이기 송지 아니 비체도 아니 전주생이 라발이야 아니 라블리는 상 방자와도 이기 송지 이기 송이 니도스 이니까 아니 이기 송시 거야 이 고전기 위에부터 아니 이기 소리는 양나 대단 양도 아니 domestically
So then if you use this verse for taking upon yourself the two minds of enlightenment at the same time, then with the last line you say, I am sustained by the Buddha's enlightenment. Or you can say, or you can also translate that as, I take to heart, I embrace the Buddha's enlightenment, which means that you take to heart the engaging mind of enlightenment, but on top of that, you also commit yourself, you take to heart, you embrace the deeds of the Bodhisattvas and committing yourself to do whatever it takes in order to train in the deeds of Bodhisattvas. So I am sustained by the Buddha's enlightenment. I embrace the Buddha's enlightenment. You commit yourself at the same time for the aspiring mind, but also for the trainings in the deeds of Bodhisattvas. That's it. Mm-hmm. So the two are number one, all right. So we might leave it here for now because we also need to do some preparation for this afternoon somehow. So maybe I'll put the prayers on the screen. And just before we do that, all right, so we will take a break from the general program next week. So we're not going to have a session next week, but we're going to come back in 2 weeks' time to continue on with Lama Tsongkhapa's presentation of the status of the path to enlightenment. His Holiness is going to give the vow today at 1:30, so you can tune in to www.dalalama.com for the links to the live streaming, or go to His Holiness's Facebook page and get the live streaming from there. At 4 o'clock, we have a Shakyamuni Buddha Puja that will also be available on Zoom. So if you want to join the Puja Galore, you're most welcome to do so. So, sorry? So we have a Sunday meditation with Venerable Tony. Sorry? 10 a.m. All right, 10 a.m. Sunday with Venerable Tony. Yeah, that will also be on Zoom. you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
See you all. See you, Doctor. Stay warm.
Big hug.
Yeah, right.
See ya.
Birthday boy, come on. I want to see you. Birthday boy.
Yeah.
Good on you, Nadia. I know.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Carson.
And this is my gift to you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, yes. This is Sherona. What's some of the diligent guy?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Instead of a Harley Davidson for a midlife crisis. Yeah, it's almost like a Harley Davidson.
So Geshe, you join us in the cafe?
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Now?
Can't hear anything.
Now, are we heading down now? Now? Yes. Now.
Okay.
All right. So let's go down to the cafe. Thank you. I'll disconnect. I'll log out.
Okay. So say goodbye, everybody. Say goodbye. Oh, goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Nadia.
It's the first time she was on.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just